I just don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I'm really sorry if I've upset anyone, if I've offended anyone today. I just don't have enough faith to be an atheist, and I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm not offended. I feel sorry for you, but I'm not offended. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. So today we've got ourselves a street preacher, which is a refreshing change from all those car theists. But of course, he's being filmed in vertical video. If it's not one thing, it's another. You takes your phone, you turns it like this. Okay?
I'll give you 3 reasons why I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. My first reason is this. Explosions don't design, they destroy. Now, when we go to school, how are we told that this Earth came about? We're told it came about by a Big Bang. So my question is, to the atheist, or to anyone who thinks that happened, if you can name me one explosion, one Big Bang in the whole history of humanity that created anything good, that created any order.
This guy needs to do his homework. First of all, the term Big Bang was intended as colorful imagery, not meant to be taken literally. There's some dispute about whether or not it was meant to disparage the idea, yet the term caught on regardless. But if anyone hears Big Bang and then thinks the universe began like this, they're either being dishonest or they have no idea what they're talking about. And in either case, it needs correcting.
Name me just one explosion that's created anything good. When I think of explosions, I think of Hiroshima, I think of Manchester, September the 11th, Afghanistan. Everything that happened in those explosions caused mess and chaos.
If you look it up, the Big Bang was not actually an explosion. It was an expansion of space itself. If you're picturing it like something out of an action movie, you've got a very wrong impression of what happened. But let's suppose it was like that. The interesting thing about explosions is that eventually they settle down. Everything becomes regular, orderly. To insist that an explosion has to create something good is to say that value is something other than an opinion. We think being alive is good, but that's our opinion, and it may not be shared by those creatures we kill for food or to protect ourselves. Value is relative, and to demand we point out an explosion that had a good or bad end result fundamentally misunderstands several concepts all at once, and is hardly a good argument.
Do you know what the professor at Princeton University said, Edwin Conkin? He said this. Now this is an amazing quote, so listen to this. The probability of life originating from accident is comparable to the probability of the Oxford Dictionary resulting from an explosion in a printing factory.
The religious are so fond of saying that an accident is the only possible alternative to something being deliberate. But again, if you look at the universe, it sure does seem a rather orderly place, quantum mechanics aside. And even if quantum mechanics really does produce genuine randomness, and I'm more with Albert Einstein in doubting it, but I'm open to being convinced, it doesn't seem to affect that order terribly much. The notion that the only possibilities are deliberate or random is obviously a false dichotomy, which simple observation ought to at least suggest, and to assert otherwise is clearly engaging in biased thinking.
And my second reason is this. Slime does not know the difference between right and wrong.
Like value, right and wrong are matters of perspective. If they weren't, there would be no disagreements on the matter, and there definitely are. It doesn't take much looking around to see that. When it comes right down to it, right and wrong are nothing more than extreme versions of like and dislike. In fact, the terms right and wrong are very misleading because they imply correct and incorrect when both are nothing more than opinion. And expecting slime to have such preferences when it lacks the ability to think or feel is ludicrous. This example is the product of dishonesty or stupidity or ignorance. Pick one. I'll wait.
Okay, let me put this to you then, ladies and gentlemen. One of you lie down in front of me and I'll step on you. Is that right or wrong? It's wrong, isn't it? Because you have got more value than a piece of slime.
Show me one thing in this universe that has absolute, unchanging value. What good is a bar of gold to a man drowning in the ocean? I guarantee you he'd trade that gold for a life raft. And no matter how much we may feel otherwise, that same trade-off is true of human life. Let's say that same man is sharing a life raft with someone else, and neither of them has any food. At what point do you think another person's life would become worth rather less than a bite to eat? How many days without rescue before one of those two people ends up on the end of the other's toothpick? Because it will happen. And to say that a human being has more value than a piece of slime takes for granted the human opinion of value, which is clearly not universally held by all creatures, never mind all humans.
And yet, you know what we're told in the science lessons? We're told that we evolved from something called primordial slime over millions of years. So my question to the atheist is, at what point did we develop a conscience?
If you want an answer, as in at what point of brain development and awareness, at what year in prehistory humans developed a conscience, I can't give it to you. However, the necessary conditions for a conscience to develop are much easier. I touched on it briefly earlier. It shouldn't take much thought to realize that a conscience comes from self-preservation, coupled with enough of a community to bring about cooperation for survival. When creatures mutually understand that hurting each other comes with consequences, and that cooperation comes with benefits, that's when the conscience begins to develop, because the results of breaking that mutual bond are not advantageous and may be harmful, which can lead to being ostracized or killed. The conscience is a way of involuntarily telling oneself to not do that again in the name of mutual benefit of the tribe, pack, or community. And reasonably, natural selection would preserve those with the greatest conscience, because they'd be the ones most helpful to survival. And this is why a conscience can be observed in non-humans as well. So even if I cannot tell you when we developed a conscience, the way how and the reasons why are pretty simple. Even if I have some of the details wrong, I'm sure the basic premise is sound.
Another question for you, okay? Is Hitler an evil man, or is Hitler a good man?
First point, Godwin's law, that's a paddlin'. Second point, good and evil are just as much matters of perspective as right and wrong. Third point, it depends who you ask, doesn't it? I'm not super pumped about Hitler, and I bet you aren't either. But I also bet we can find a bunch of neo-Nazis out there who think he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. If you're going to say one of us is correct and the others are incorrect, I'd like to hear your reasons. Can you give any that don't invoke a god you can't prove exists?
How do you know he's an evil man? I'll tell you how, because the Bible says...
Oh, I'm so sorry. You lose this round, but thanks for playing. We have some wonderful parting gifts for you. And now, back to our contestants.
My third and final reason is this. You can't put love into a test tube. Now, this is really interesting, but scientists will tell us that they can explain everything. And they'll tell us that love is a chemical reaction in the brain. Now, if you're a scientist, let me ask you this question. Tell me, what is it like going on a scientific date? I mean, if I was on a date with my wife, I wouldn't want scientists around in lab coats and everything telling me what to do.
Well, fortunately for you, scientists study, not dictate.
Where does love come from? If love is just a chemical reaction in the brain, and this is my wife here, and I see another woman who I'm more attracted to than my wife and gives me a bigger chemical reaction, can you condemn me for cheating on her? No, love is more than just a chemical reaction in the brain.
Do you remember that whole conscience thing, the weighing of drawbacks and benefits? You go cheating on your wife, you'll likely hurt her, which your conscience really won't care for much, will it? And then you might split up, which won't be good for any children you might have, even if it makes life healthier for the two of you. Love is as much about self-preservation and as much of a community glue as conscience.
Well, again, my wife's here, okay? Say I get cancer, okay, and I'm terribly ill in the hospital with cancer, and I'm going through chemotherapy, and I'm all ill and I'm all pale, and I'm not attractive, and, you know, my wife's thinking, well, that's not the same guy I married, okay? Is she going to stick by me? Who thinks she's going to stick by me? She is, isn't she? Because love requires an action of the will.
No, it really doesn't. Love, though it serves a useful purpose, is actually quite irrational, like most human emotions. And if it required an action of the will, then we could banish it as well as employ it, and there would be no jealousy. Breakups would be a ho-hum affair, no big deal. Love may serve a useful purpose, but it has no checks and balances, no intelligence behind it. Love is irrational, and it can misfire, leading us into trouble.
Now here is the ultimate question. What would you think of Jesus Christ if when he was hanging on the cross he decided, do you know what? I could be in heaven right now. I don't need to be with these people who are spitting on me, shouting at me, laughing at me. I don't need to be here. What would you think of that? Would you think that that's a loving Jesus?
What would that have to do with it? The guy's in pain. Either pump him with Demerol and get him to a hospital, or let him die and end the hurting. I don't know about a loving Jesus, but that would be a loving me, putting the poor fellow out of his misery. Oh, I know. You're going to say that he's loving because putting himself through that torture saves us from sin and all that. But now we need you to prove that any of that was true, and I don't have enough faith, to believe it from some ancient book that's gotten a lot of facts about history and science so badly wrong.
We've all done wrong and we've all messed up and we deserve to be punished.
Which is what courts of law and jails are for. No God required.
And you know what the even better news is this? 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead. Now that is incredible. If you died and 3 days later came back from the grave, I'd listen very carefully to what you had to say.
People who come back from the dead, you know what they say? Brains. Brains. And hey, it's pretty lucky they didn't have Jesus cremated, huh?
I'm going to stop there.
And that's the only part of this video that came close to convincing me there even might be a God. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. You've got two choices. You can rate this video and share it everywhere across social media, or I can send my minions after you. Choose wisely.